Hey everybody, it's George. Welcome back. Hope you're doing great wherever you are in the world. For those of you that are thinking about Portugal or you're living in Portugal, a question I want to ask you at the top of this video is, when you hear numbers, metrics, information, statistics, how much faith do you put into those numbers that you're hearing and seeing and reading about? Since I've been making videos, 4.5 years, I've really struggled sometimes to make a video because often I can't find information on a particular topic. Or when someone makes a suggestion on a video, could you talk about housing prices, and whether I'm looking at, so for example, real estate like Idealista, or I'm looking at newspapers, Portugal's kind of main database, the INE, EMA, when we're talking about immigration. What's interesting is often I'm just re-reporting the news, and then there will be an article or there'll be numbers thrown out that I'll put into the video, and often I'll get comments, and it doesn't matter. It could be Portuguese as well as foreigners going, that number just doesn't seem right. That seems too low or too high, or that doesn't seem to make sense with our experience. And even newspapers, I've watched where newspapers will mention different prices for real estate 1 week apart. I'm going, well, real estate didn't change that much in 1 week. Immigration numbers, that there's several 100,000 backlog, then there's a couple 100,000 backlog. Well, there can't be like a 300,000 swing in backlog in 2 days. So I often wonder, and I'm wondering, when you look at information, how much faith and trust do you put into the information, the numbers that you're hearing when you're looking it up on databases? Even a place that I think is pretty agnostic, Numbeo. I use it, and I think it's pretty accurate. Sometimes it's not as timely, but when I have compared several places in Portugal to several places in the United States or other countries, as we look to maybe move when we retire, thinking about where that destination may be and starting to put together cost of living, I get the feeling that seems to be a pretty accurate website, and the information in there is pretty good. But what do you think? I'm making all of this, and I'm speaking about this because I wanted to put this up here, that President Marcelo in Portugal is not quite agreeing with the numbers that he's hearing from EMA as well as the INE. Some of that information, the immigrant data, I think based upon who's reporting what, is off by, could be a couple 100,000. And it seems to me it's a separate conversation to talk about undocumented people, because there would probably be no way of really knowing who's in a particular country because they're undocumented. There is no information or paper trail for them. But those people that are documented, that have gone through the resident visa process, if all of the systems were talking to one another, that's a major problem with Portugal, they're not, is that the government should know within a fair degree of certainty how many foreigners are living in the country, like from a head count perspective, at any given time. And they should be able to determine, in my mind, based upon taxes, based upon utility bills, based upon in and out stamps if they're leaving the airport, and again, if they're leaving the EU, there should be a better number or a more defined number, I think, of who's in Portugal. Now, I get it. People could be getting into Portugal and then they're in Spain or they're in France or they're someplace else. But it seems like I'm glad that the president was questioning this information, and that there were a couple articles about it, because that to me has been one of my dilemmas of making many videos over the years. Whether I'm positive or pro Portugal on something, I'd like to give some stats for that. If I'm con Portugal for something, I'd like to give some stats for that. And I'd say over the last year, there are a lot of commentary from people that are, I have a personal experience from people sending me emails and articles of what's going on. But when I'm trying to look that information up in databases, it either doesn't get reported, it's not something that is recorded at all, but it's very hard to find information. And so that's one thing that if you're thinking about moving to Portugal, or if you're living there, trying to get accurate metrics to work with. If you're trying to make a decision on whether you should move or not, whether you should stay in the country or leave, you would hope that the information that you're seeing and reading is accurate, that you're not getting like a false impression, or you're getting, I'll say, misinformation on something, that what you are reading and seeing is accurate. And the numbers, if you're a numbers person and really focused in on that. But I'm curious to get your take on this. As I try, when I can find information, try to post, here's the numbers, what do you think? Do you agree or disagree? This helps validate several videos where I've made where I'm not agreeing with the information, but I don't have anything to refute it. I can't say, well, that I feel the numbers off, but I have nothing to go against that, like empirically. And there are many times people make comments going, I don't think that video is correct that you made because I think the number is different. Or we saw a stat that says something completely the opposite of what you're stating. And that's, I think, to some degree, I'll call it the gray area, where you don't necessarily have great information on something. Healthcare, immigration, real estate, property prices. Because of that lack of really granular data, I think it creates frustration for everybody, all sides of a particular argument, because we're arguing emotion with one another, but rarely do we have, let's say, statistics or facts to back up what we're feeling. Sometimes we'll have information here, sometimes we won't. I'm glad, though, that the president has kind of identified this, and maybe this will help lead to maybe some reforms within the government as far as how data is collected and in more or better information out there than general data on, let's say, property prices and real estate. For example, we lived in Lisbon. Well, Lisbon price per square meter is this, or rent per square meter. Well, Lisbon's a very diverse city, and there's a lot of high-income housing and low-income housing, and so that doesn't really help someone determine what they should rent or buy something for. Healthcare, trying to find out successful surgeries or hospitals that have greater success, or maybe less issues, whether it be botched or mishandled surgeries. That would be good information to know. Immigration, knowing how many people are technically in the country. Like, for example, it was showing here, I think the INE is saying there could be like as many as like 10.75 million people in the country, whereas I think the government, like EMA, might have been stating 1.54, and just trying to figure out, okay, well, that's a big difference and that's a big swing and makes an impact in a lot of areas, and it seems like there would be a better way to define that. But what do you think about the information? What do you think about the numbers? Do you trust the numbers in general? And this is not just a Portugal only problem, although the channel is mostly Portugal videos. This could happen in a number of countries and might have the same, complexities where you're not getting accurate data. But what do you think about this? Love to hear your comments below. As always, thank you so much for watching and enjoy your travels.